Snow still blanketed Bangor, Maine. Population 31,997 when Anna Whitaker vanished. On the night of December 14, 2010, an unexpected blizzard swept through, plunging the town into biting winds and thick fog. At 9:30 p.m., Anna's last coworker saw her don a red coat and leave the grocery store, hurrying across the icy parking lot. Her silver Civic's headlights briefly pierced the snow before the car rolled out of the lot. At their suburban home, Anna's parents sat by the window, waiting for their daughter's return. But as the clock ticked past midnight, her familiar figure never appeared. What happened in the hours that followed would haunt Bangor for over a decade. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Bangor, Maine, on the night of December 14, 2010, was buried under relentless snowfall, draping every street in a cold, white blanket. The dim yellow streetlights flickered in the storm, their feeble glow only managing to illuminate small circles on the thick snow before being swallowed by the darkness. The city seemed frozen in silence, the only sounds the howling wind cutting through bare trees and the crunch of snow under the feet of the few still out at that hour. In this setting, Anna Whitaker, 25, finished a late shift at a small grocery store on Main Street. Described by others as diligent, reserved, and always courteous to customers, Anna, that evening, as on many others, swapped her green apron for a heavy red coat to brace against December's biting cold. Around 9:30, she stepped out of the store, waved to a coworker, and walked briskly, almost hurriedly, through the fresh snow to the dark parking lot behind. Another employee, staying late to clean, caught a glimpse of Anna's petite frame fading into the snowfall, her red coat a stark contrast against the murky darkness, like the last visible mark before vanishing entirely. Minutes later, a jogger passing the street opposite reported briefly seeing the headlights of a Honda Civic flash on, casting a short golden beam through the foggy snow before the car pulled away. The man didn't think much of it, assuming it was just a young woman heading home in the cold. But that was the last time anyone saw Anna Whitaker alive. At their small suburban home in Bangor, Anna's parents sat by the window, staring out at the empty street, hoping to hear the familiar hum of her car's engine. 10 o'clock, then 11, the clock ticked on, but there was no sign of their daughter. Anna's phone rang repeatedly before going to voicemail, every call unanswered. Her mother began pacing the living room, clutching a shawl, while her father stepped onto the porch, standing silently in the freezing cold, gazing down the dark road. Refusing to give in to the growing unease, they reassured themselves that her car might have broken down, or she'd stopped at a friend's. But by midnight, as every reasonable explanation faded, their worry turned to real fear. Near 1 in the morning, under the harsh glow of a neon light on an old wooden table, Anna's father, voice hoarse and trembling, called 911. "Our daughter is missing," he said, each word seeming to freeze in the icy air. That moment marked the start of a case that would haunt the Whitaker family and the Bangor community for years to come. A winter night that seemed ordinary but became an unforgettable tragedy. When the Whitaker family's emergency call came through, the 911 center immediately contacted the Bangor Police Department. A patrol unit was dispatched that night to the family's suburban home to gather initial details. The clock was nearing 1 a.m., and heavy snow had nearly paralyzed the roads. Officers listened in the warm, small living room as Anna's parents, trembling, clutched a photo of their daughter. All they had was a description of Anna's outfit that night, her usual route from the store to their home, and the fact that she'd never been gone overnight without notifying them. A formal missing person protocol was activated. Police alerted all patrol units in the area to look for a young woman, providing her photo and the license plate of her silver Honda Civic. That night, police cars rolled through slick snow, their headlights sweeping the roads from the Main Street grocery store to the residential area where Anna lived. Every turn, every stretch of road was closely inspected. Another officer called hospitals within a 30-mile radius, checking for any young female patients admitted, due to accidents or falls, but all responses came back negative. Meanwhile, a team reviewed reported accidents from that night, but found nothing. It became increasingly clear Anna hadn't simply slid off a snowy road. By early morning, as the first faint light of dawn crept through the gray sky, the search expanded to the northern outskirts. A patrol officer on Route 15, a forested road connecting Bangor to Orono, noticed a car parked askew on the shoulder, nearly buried in snow but with a glint of silver reflecting in the early light. Approaching, they confirmed it was Anna Whitaker's registered Honda Civic. An urgent report was sent to headquarters, and within minutes, the area was cordoned off. The initial scene presented a mix of clear and perplexing details. The driver's door was unlocked, the keys still in the ignition. Anna's purse sat on the passenger seat, her wallet and ID untouched, ruling out a typical robbery. On the back seat, faint, dark brown stains, hardened as if dried for hours, prompted forensic technicians to collect samples, suspecting blood. In the snow around the car, there were scattered footprints, including at least one set of large men's shoes, much bigger than Anna's. The heavy snow and wind had blurred most tracks, but enough remained to show movement around the vehicle that night. CSI technicians began photographing, numbering, and collecting samples. Every strand of hair on the seats, every tiny fabric fragment on the door was sealed in evidence bags. Some long brown hairs didn't match Anna's. The front seat and gear shift were sprayed with chemicals to detect foreign fingerprints. The most striking anomaly was how conspicuously the car was left on a major road, as if the perpetrator didn't care about concealment. At this point, investigators at the scene concluded this was no longer a voluntary disappearance. Anna wouldn't have left her purse, wallet, and ID behind if she'd walked away willingly. The car abandoned with keys in the ignition further suggested she hadn't left voluntarily. The faint but clear traces of blood and unfamiliar footprints in the snow pointed to a far more chilling possibility. Anna had been forced from her car and likely abducted. In a brief meeting on the shoulder of Route 15, the lead investigator ordered an expanded search deeper into the forest and sent all collected samples to the Augusta lab for urgent analysis. As snow continued to fall heavily, covering the Civic's roof, investigators knew each passing hour was erasing fragile clues. Anna Whitaker's disappearance had entered a new phase, no longer just a mysterious vanishing, but a potential criminal case with clear signs of violence and mystery. After finding Anna's Honda Civic abandoned on Route 15, Bangor police focused all resources on reconstructing her final hours. The lead detective spread a large map across a table in the briefing room, marking Anna's daily route in red, from the Main Street grocery store, through the residential area, and onto Route 15 toward her suburban home. Every stop, every turn was circled and cross-checked with traffic cameras and witness statements. The biggest challenge was Bangor's limited traffic camera system in 2010. At major intersections, only low-resolution cameras were available. Reviewing footage from the night of December 14th, technicians saw a small silver car pass by around 9:45 p.m. Matching the time Anna left the store, the image was blurry, the license plate unreadable, but the car's shape matched her Civic. After that, the car vanished into the snow, with no further sightings. This meant police could only confirm Anna drove away from the store, but what happened next remained unclear. Next, officers interviewed those who last saw Anna alive. A coworker from the evening shift said Anna seemed completely normal, showing no signs of stress or plans to go anywhere unusual. She even joked about cooking a late dinner for her family since the store was busy, causing her to leave later than usual. Another coworker vividly recalled Anna pulling her red coat tight, head down, hurrying through the snow to the parking lot, her small figure fading into the cold wind. No one heard or saw anything unusual in the lot at the time. Police also contacted Anna's ex-boyfriend, quickly named by local media as a potential lead. He stated he had no contact with Anna on December 14th. Phone records confirmed no calls or texts between them that evening. He also had a solid alibi, attending a party with friends in Portland, nearly 2 hours from Bangor. Multiple witnesses verified his presence, ruling him out as a suspect. While reviewing routes and witnesses around the parking lot, an unexpected name emerged: Richard Hale, 28. A mechanic at a small garage near a gas station on Anna's route home. A witness reported that on the night of December 14th, Richard was at the gas station, briefly greeting Anna when she stopped to buy a bottle of water before leaving. The witness recalled light from the gas station's window, illuminating Richard in a dark coat, exchanging a few words with Anna before he went back inside. This detail was immediately noted, as Hale was among the last to see Anna before she vanished. Investigators checked Richard's record: no serious criminal history, just minor traffic violations. He lived alone in a rented apartment near the garage. When summoned to the police station for questioning, Richard appeared calm. He claimed he only briefly met Anna, exchanged pleasantries, and left shortly after. But a discrepancy arose. Richard said he was home before 9 p.m., while the witness insisted they saw him talking to Anna around 9:30. This inconsistency was flagged. Richard Hale, a person of interest to monitor. Thus, within nearly 24 hours of Anna's disappearance, police had a relatively complete timeline. Anna left the store at 9:30, walked to the parking lot in her red coat. A camera captured a silver car heading toward Route 15 around 9:45. At the nearby gas station, she encountered Richard Hale. By early morning, her car was found abandoned on Route 15, door unlocked, belongings intact. Amid these scattered facts, Richard's presence stood out as an unusual piece of the puzzle. Not enough to prove anything, but enough to make the entire investigative team pause and wonder if Anna didn't vanish willingly. Who stopped her in the snowy darkness that night? In the first 2 days after Anna's Honda Civic was found, Richard Hale became a focal point of the case file. The timeline showed a clear discrepancy. He claimed to be home before 9 p.m. But a witness insisted they saw him talking to Anna at the gas station around 9:30. This contradiction prompted Bangor police to bring Richard in for formal questioning. The interrogation took place in a small room with cold white walls, a scratched metal table, and 2 detectives seated across from him. Richard entered, wearing a heavy brown coat, his burly frame and impassive face hard to read. He sat, crossed his arms, and waited. The lead detective began gently, explaining this was just an information-gathering session, not an accusation, to clarify inconsistencies and aid the search for Anna. Richard nodded, repeating his earlier statement: "I was home all night, didn't go anywhere after 9. He spoke slowly, avoiding eye contact, occasionally glancing up but quickly looking back at the table. When asked if anyone could confirm he was home, Richard vaguely replied that he was watching TV alone, no visitors, no one to verify. At this point, the second detective took on the bad cop role. His tone sharpened, pointing at the file. "We have a witness who saw you at the gas station at 9:30, talking to Anna. How do you explain that?" Richard remained calm, shrugging. "The witness must be mistaken. I didn't meet her. I wasn't out." His response was firm but unconvincing. The detectives alternated tactics, soft then harsh, trying to apply psychological pressure. They asked about Anna's demeanor, why the garage's lights were reportedly on later than usual. But Richard stuck to his story. He was home that night, didn't see Anna, didn't go out. After 3 hours, the interrogation ended without new information. No confession, no clear slip-up to pursue further. Police had only an unprovable time discrepancy and an uncertain witness. In their internal report, they noted Richard Hale, suspicious but no concrete evidence. This meant, though still under suspicion, he was free to leave. News of the interrogation spread quickly through Bangor. Some store employees whispered that Richard had an unsettling presence, often lingering his gaze on Anna when she passed the garage. Others recalled seeing him alone at a bar, staring at a TV screen with an expressionless face. With just a spark of suspicion, rumors began to spread like wildfire in the winter chill. Local papers hinted that police had a man under suspicion, and though no name was given, the small town quickly guessed who it was. The Whitaker family began asking questions. They knew Anna occasionally stopped at the gas station near Richard's garage, but she never mentioned knowing or interacting much with him. When they heard a witness saw Anna talking to Richard the night she vanished, her mother fell silent, while her father, furious, slammed his hand on the table. If he was the last one to see my daughter, he needs to tell the truth. Yet, the truth remained out of reach, as all the police had was an inconsistency in his statement. In the days that followed, Richard went about his work at the garage as usual. Bangor residents whispered as they saw him drive his old green pickup through town. Some insisted they always felt something off about him. Others thought the police might be targeting the wrong person. An uneasy atmosphere enveloped the town. Anna was still missing, and the only prominent name wasn't enough to press charges. Investigators understood the fragility of the situation. Without concrete evidence, it was all baseless suspicion. The case remained open. Richard stayed under surveillance, but no progress was made. In the weekend summary report, the head of the criminal unit noted briefly, "First suspect identified, but nothing beyond a time discrepancy. Case needs more evidence." And as snow continued to fall heavily outside, the Whitaker family and the Bangor community lived on in fear and doubt, unsure if the truth would ever surface or if Anna would remain just a name on the list of unsolved disappearances. Anna's silver Honda Civic, after being documented at the Route 15 scene, was towed to the Bangor Police Department's garage for detailed forensic examination. In a cold warehouse, dim fluorescent lights cast a pale glow on the snow-dusted car. CSI technicians in protective suits and rubber gloves began by opening the doors, photographing the interior before touching anything. The driver's front seat was strangely clean, with no signs of a struggle or disturbed items. The gear shift, steering wheel, and dashboard were tidy, as if the driver had stopped calmly. But the back seat told a different story. Under the beam of a spotlight, faint dark brown stains appeared on the upholstery, small, scattered, not in large patches, but enough to send a chill through anyone looking. Some stains had hardened, likely present for hours, before the car was found. Technicians carefully cut fabric samples from the seat, sealing them in evidence bags. Further inspection involved sweeping the interior with an ultraviolet light. Results revealed tiny specks faintly glowing on the rear floor and near the passenger door, suspected to be blood splatter. Each speck was collected with swabs, sealed in labeled vials, on the passenger seat. A long brown hair was found tangled in the seatbelt's crease, placed in a glass tube with a note, "Origin unidentified." Additionally, technicians discovered dark fabric fibers caught in the door latch, not matching the red coat Anna wore that night. All evidence was sealed, but when sent to the lab, the limitations of 2010 technology became starkly apparent. DNA analysis of the tiny blood traces only yielded preliminary results. The sample was female, matching Anna's gender, but couldn't be definitively confirmed as hers. National databases like CODIS were not yet robust, and with such a small DNA sample, comparison with others was impossible. The hair from the passenger seat was also deemed insufficient data due to lacking a route for nuclear DNA. The lab report concluded coldly. Collected samples insufficient to confirm identity or link to a specific suspect. For investigators, this was a harsh blow to hopes of a quick resolution. They had a scene with clear signs of anomaly, blood traces, unknown hair, unidentified fabric, but these were merely suggestive clues, not binding evidence. In an internal report, the lead investigator wrote, "Findings in the vehicle suggest possible conflict or injury, but lack the strength to prove a crime or identify a specific suspect. More evidence needed." Meanwhile, Richard Hale's name lingered in the investigators' minds. He was the last person a witness confirmed speaking to Anna. His statement had inconsistencies, and now the car held blood and unfamiliar traces. But in court, these facts couldn't convict anyone. It remained suspicion. The lack of advanced technology at the time pushed Anna's disappearance to the brink of a dead end. When the Whitaker family asked for updates, police had to admit they'd found traces in the car, but the analysis yielded no firm conclusions. Anna's parents were stunned, and Bangor's community grew restless. They whispered in coffee shops that someone among them had harmed Anna but escaped justice due to technological limits. Suspicion spread through the town, with everyone scrutinizing each other, and Richard, though never convicted, became a shadowy figure in neighbors' eyes. All the case had at that point was an abandoned car, unidentified blood traces, unknown hair and fabric. Without a body or direct witness, the case drifted into darkness. The evidence was sealed, stored in the lab's cold storage, hoping one day advanced science would unlock the truth. But in late 2010, all that remained was the harsh silence of a Maine winter and an unsolved case file. After the Civic's forensic results offered no breakthrough, investigators returned to their routine, cross-referencing the timeline with anyone potentially linked to Anna Whitaker. They repeatedly mapped her route from the grocery store to Route 15, overlaying it with collected statements. But the more they checked, the clearer it became that no one, except Richard Hale, had a clear discrepancy in time and place. The ex-boyfriend had a solid alibi. The last coworker to see Anna was confirmed to have left the store soon after. Peripheral witnesses were too vague. Some saw car lights. Others vaguely recalled a man in a dark coat. Nothing was strong enough for a formal charge. Richard, naturally, remained the brightest name in the file. The lead investigator ordered a small team to discreetly monitor him. They logged his garage hours, his haunts, even his habits at the town bar. But Richard was cautious, revealing no behavior that could be interpreted as guilty. To neighbors, he was just a gruff, quiet mechanic, sometimes irritable, but not troublesome. The surveillance file thickened weekly, but it held only mundane details. Richard buying beer at the supermarket. Richard home by 8 p.m. Richard fishing on weekends. No evidence linked him to Anna's disappearance beyond the initial contradictory statement. Meanwhile, the wide-scale search continued for months before halting. Initially, police and volunteers scoured forests along Route 15, dove into frozen rivers, and used helicopters for aerial sweeps. But the harsh winter's thick snow erased all traces. Come spring, as snow melted, they hoped to find something buried. Yet, the results were empty fields, no items, no sign of Anna. Weeks passed, hope dwindled. Search funding became a burden, with Bangor police juggling dozens of other cases. After nearly 9 months, the search team disbanded. Anna Whitaker's file was stored in the Criminal Investigation Unit's cabinet, marked simply, Status, Cold. By late 2011, the case was officially designated a cold case. This meant no active investigation, only a file waiting for new evidence. For the Whitaker family, this was unbearable pain. The mother refused to accept it, keeping Anna's bedroom untouched, as if she'd just stepped out. The father grew restless, seeing police cars pass, clinging to faint hopes of news. They repeatedly called the station, wrote to state senators, even appeared on local TV shows to plead for attention. But all they got from authorities was a promise: we won't forget, we'll wait for an opportunity. In Bangor's community, the case's silence left a haunting void. People began eyeing each other suspiciously. They whispered about Richard Hale, but hesitated to accuse outright. Some swore they saw him near the parking lot the night Anna vanished. But when pressed, their memories blurred, nothing certain. Rumors grew distorted. Some said Anna was taken to Canada, others claimed she fled with a secret lover. But these were just rumors. The official file still hinged on the scant evidence in the Civic and Richard's time discrepancy. For investigators, it was a bitter failure. They knew the case showed criminal signs from the abandoned car, but 2010 forensic science couldn't go further. The tiny blood traces, hair and fabric, all sealed and stored in the lab's freezer, could only wait for new technology to speak. For now, all leads were frozen in time, like Route 15 that winter, white, frigid, and traceless. The stalemate pushed Anna's case into near-total darkness. By late 2011, her name no longer graced the front page of the Bangor Daily News. Occasionally, small columns called for tips, but these were quickly overshadowed by other news. To law enforcement, Anna was just a cold file among hundreds of unsolved cases in Maine. But for her family, each day was torment. No body to bury, no explanation to ease their grief. Only a silent void in their small suburban home, where Anna's photo remained on the mantel, forever 25. Thus, within a year, the disappearance that once shook Bangor faded from the legal system's focus. No one knew that within those sealed evidence bags lay clues that could change everything, locked away by 2010's technological limits. Anna Whitaker's case officially entered the shadows of a cold case, where waiting could span decades, and the pain never faded. Anna Whitaker's disappearance file, once labeled a cold case, was moved to the Maine Criminal Investigation Unit's storage. Inside the case box was all that remained of an unsolved mystery: sealed bags containing unidentified hairs, swabs with tiny blood traces from the Civic's back seat, a small fabric piece cut from the door latch, and photos of faint footprints in the snow. All were numbered, noted, and neatly stored in a dedicated cold storage unit, alongside hundreds of other case samples waiting for a chance at reanalysis. In the 2011 year-end report, the lead investigator wrote a chilling line: "No body, unable to confirm victim deceased." It was an administrative conclusion, but for the Whitaker family, it was a sentence left hanging. They didn't know if their daughter was alive somewhere or dead and hidden. From 2012 onward, the Whitaker family held a small annual ceremony on December 14th at their suburban home. Relatives, neighbors, and a few of Anna's old friends gathered around a shrine, lighting candles that flickered weakly in the cold Maine winter. The mother often read a Bible passage, her voice breaking, and they prayed Anna would one day be found. But after each ceremony, as guests left, the house sank into heavy silence. Anna's bedroom remained untouched, blankets dusty, books open on the desk, as if she'd just stepped out and would return. Yet, year after year, that door never opened. For the police, resources for the case dwindled. Maine, a vast state with a small investigative force, faced new cases constantly: drug trafficking, domestic violence, other murders. Officers who once searched for Anna were reassigned. Initially, they flipped through old files out of habit, but as no new leads emerged, the Whitaker file sank to the bottom of the drawer. In internal records, it was coded, joining the list of cold cases where truth lay buried with time. Bangor's community also grew quiet. As media coverage faded, Anna's name surfaced only in brief chats among older residents, recalling the girl in the red coat who vanished in the snowy night. Richard Hale stayed in town, working at his small garage. Some whispered he was involved, but no one could be sure. Without a body or solid evidence, it was all baseless rumor, like any small community. Bangor learned to live with the void, turning it into a collective scar. No one faced it directly, but everyone knew it was there. For the Whitakers, the wait was torture. The father frequently visited the station, asking for updates, only to hear no new developments. The mother pored over old newspaper clippings stored in a wooden box under the bed. Anna's younger brother, now grown, said his childhood was haunted by the sense of a family member vanishing without a trace, leaving an unfillable void. The evidence bags, those tiny blood traces and unknown hairs, sat silently in the state lab's freezer. Young investigators passing the evidence locker saw Whitaker, 2010 on the labels, but had no time or technology to revisit. The case lingered, frozen like a Maine winter, and the Whitakers lived on with quiet pain, knowing the truth was out there, locked behind the door of a cold case, with no clue when it might open. In June 2020, as early summer rains swept through the dense pine forests near Orono, a highway construction crew stumbled upon something they never expected. Clearing land to widen a road connecting Bangor to the north, an excavator's bucket hit something hard and brittle. The operator first thought it was limestone, but as fragments surfaced, sunlight revealed a familiar shape: a long bone, eroded at the ends, but clearly human. Panicked, the crew called the site manager, and within an hour, the area was sealed off. The report quickly reached Orono Police, then the Maine State Police. That afternoon, forensic teams and investigators arrived, setting up a white tent amid the expanded forest clearing to shield everything from the weather. The scene beneath the damp forest floor emerged as experts carefully excavated. Using small trowels and brushes, they documented and bagged each bone fragment, a cracked partial skull, a few intact teeth, ribs, pelvis, and rotted clothing were mixed in the soil. Nearby was a tattered red fabric, barely recognizable as cloth. Some threads in the dirt immediately reminded investigators of Anna's coat from the night she vanished. The area was flagged, photographed from multiple angles, and surrounding soil samples were collected for further testing. After days of excavation, experts recovered nearly a complete skeleton. It was sent to the Maine State Forensic Lab in Augusta. There, meticulous work continued, cleaning, sorting, reconstructing each fragment. Forensics quickly determined the remains were female, aged roughly 20-30, with a height matching Anna Whitaker's file. Crucially, bone samples were sent for DNA analysis to compare with data stored from 2010. The Whitaker family, after a decade of hopeless waiting, was called to provide additional DNA samples for cross-referencing. When results returned, they ended all doubt. The DNA from the remains matched Anna's sample from the missing person file a decade earlier. The missing girl was officially confirmed dead. The forensic report stated plainly, identity Anna Whitaker, 25 at time of disappearance. The news was a double-edged sword for the family. It finally gave an answer, ending the limbo of hope and despair. But it also made the pain concrete, unbearable. Anna was no longer out there to come home. For police, the body's discovery was a game-changer. It turned a vague, bodiless case into an official homicide investigation. Investigators drafted a new report, reopening the file and removing it from the cold case list. They held a closed press conference, announcing that remains found near Orono have been identified as Anna Whitaker, missing since December 2010. Before the cameras, the police chief's face showed strain. After 10 years, the case was back at square one, but now with tangible evidence. Maine media erupted, reviving memories of the girl in the red coat who vanished in the snowy night. Local papers republished Anna's portrait, her gentle smile, now haunting Bangor's community. Those who joined the original search were stunned that their worst fears were confirmed. Meanwhile, the forensic team continued analyzing the skeleton, examining the skull fracture, rib marks, hoping to pinpoint cause of death. Soil samples from the site were tested for chemicals or foreign traces. The night of December 14, 2010, now had an official answer. Anna didn't vanish or run away. She died shortly after leaving the grocery store. But a more harrowing question remained unanswered. Who took her body to the Orono forest, over 10 miles from where her Civic was found? Why did a decade of searches miss that spot? And most critically, who took her life? For the Whitaker family, a funeral was finally held. Anna's remains were laid in a simple oak coffin, buried in the town's small cemetery. Hundreds attended, bringing candles and flowers. But behind the solemn air, police knew the case was restarting. From the excavated bones, the tattered red fabric, the old blood traces in the Civic, a new investigation would proceed. This time, they were determined not to let the truth stay buried for another decade. At the Maine State Forensic Lab in Augusta, the Orono forest remains were laid out on a gleaming metal table under stark white lights. Technicians, in full-body protective suits, gloves, and masks, began weeks-long work. Bones were cleaned, sorted, and meticulously documented. The chief medical examiner, with over 20 years handling cold remains, closely inspected each detail. On the skull, he found a long fracture running from the temple to the crown. The jagged, uneven edges were typical of trauma from a strong external force. This wasn't a crack from natural bone decay. It was evidence of a direct blow with a hard object, inflicted before death. Further analysis revealed more beyond the skull injury. The pelvis and ribs showed small fractures. Some healed from earlier, others more recent. But what gripped the forensic team was a mark on the wrist bones. Under close examination, they saw a rounded indentation etched into the bone, resembling trauma from tight binding over time. These marks weren't accidental. They suggested the victim was restrained before death. Combining the binding marks with the skull trauma, the team had no doubt this was a deliberate homicide, not an accident or voluntary disappearance. Time of death analysis, based on bone decomposition and Orono's forest conditions, concluded the victim died around late 2010, closely aligning with Anna's disappearance. This match eliminated any theories of her running away or living in hiding. Anna's death occurred shortly after that night at the grocery store, and for 10 years, her body lay silently under rotting leaves and cold forest soil. The final forensic report sent to the Bangor Police Department spanned over 40 pages. Its cold words were unequivocal: cause of death, traumatic brain injury due to severe external force. Additional evidence, signs suggesting the victim's wrists were bound. Conclusion: death by intentional attack, case classified, homicide. After reading the report, the investigators sat in silence for a long time. 10 years earlier, they had suspected violence when they found tiny blood traces in the Civic. But without a body, it remained a hypothesis. Now, with evidence from the remains, their suspicions were confirmed. For the Whitaker family, this was a double blow. They had waited a decade to learn Anna was dead, and now they learned her death was the result of a violent killing. The mother nearly collapsed when the police chief informed her, "Your daughter was struck on the head, and there are signs she was restrained." The father clenched his fists, his eyes filled with a mix of rage and despair. Anna's burial, already heavy, now carried an added layer of darkness. This was not a random tragedy, but an unpunished crime. Within the police department, this confirmation immediately reactivated the entire investigative machinery. An emergency meeting was held at Bangor headquarters. The lead investigator reviewed the case, projecting images from 2010. The Civic abandoned on the roadside, sealed bags containing hair, dried blood, and snowy footprints. Now, with the forensic report, these pieces of evidence gained new weight. No longer disconnected clues, they became parts of a homicide puzzle. Forensic experts provided further analysis. The skull fracture was consistent with a blow from a hard object, possibly a metal rod, hammer, or similar heavy tool. The wrist marks suggested Anna was restrained before being killed. The likely sequence: she was intercepted, bound, removed from her car, then fatally struck before her body was taken to the forest. This scenario chillingly matched the 2010 scene. The Civic left behind, purse and ID untouched, keys still in the ignition, as if she was forcibly taken in an instant. With these findings, the case was officially renamed from Missing Person Anna Whitaker to Homicide Anna Whitaker. A murder was confirmed, and the police had no choice but to reopen the investigation with full force. In the report sent to the Maine prosecutor's office, the conclusion was clear: this is a homicide. The perpetrator remains at large. As the cold storage door holding the old evidence bags was reopened, investigators knew the past 10 years were merely the prelude to a new hunt, where modern science would speak for the bones that had been silent for a decade. After the forensic confirmation of the cause of death, the homicide Anna Whitaker file was transferred to Maine's Special Investigations Unit, tasked with handling unsolved murders. In their Augusta office, investigators spread out the thick case file on the table, from 2010's old reports to the 2020 forensic findings. A tense atmosphere filled the room, as everyone understood that after a decade on the shelf, this was a rare chance for the case to be reborn. The first step was re-examining the DNA evidence. In the lab's cold storage, the sealed bags from the Honda Civic in December 2010 remained, swabs with tiny blood traces from the back seat, the unknown hair from the passenger seatbelt, and fabric fibers caught in the door latch. These were carefully unsealed under strict conditions, and sent for analysis with new technology. Unlike a decade ago, technicians now had advanced gene sequencing systems capable of analyzing mere traces of cells. When the first results appeared on the computer screen, the team held their breath. The DNA from the tiny blood traces in the car, identified only as female in 2010, was now fully sequenced. As expected, it was Anna's blood, confirming she was injured in the vehicle. But the bigger surprise came from the hair and fabric. The DNA extracted from the unknown hair's root showed it didn't belong to Anna. The fabric also contained enough skin cells for analysis, and the results matched the foreign DNA found on Anna's wrist bones during the 2020 excavation. This evidence was monumental. The same DNA appeared in Anna's car in 2010 and on her remains a decade later. It confirmed another individual was in her car, had direct contact, and was involved in moving her body to the Orono forest. No longer a hypothesis, this was a direct link between the disappearance scene and the burial site. In a briefing, the lead investigator emphasized, "We're facing the killer. This DNA is the key." The report to the state prosecutor stated, the matching DNA across both scenes was undeniable proof of a second person's direct involvement in Anna's death. Though the identity was unknown, they now had a complete genetic profile to compare with modern databases. A team of technicians immediately uploaded the DNA to CODIS and other archives, hoping for a match with a recorded offender. But initial results were disappointing. No matches. This suggested the perpetrator had never been arrested or left DNA in prior cases. In 2010, this would have been a dead end, but by 2020, investigators had a new tool: genetic genealogy. This method, famously used to catch the Golden State Killer in California, compared suspect DNA to online genealogy databases where millions of Americans voluntarily submitted genetic data to trace relatives or ancestry. Maine, though small, was part of this trend. Technicians encoded the foreign DNA, uploaded it to cooperating platforms, and began comparisons. Days of waiting passed tensely. Software ran millions of matches, searching for partial genetic alignments. Finally, in late August, results emerged, a high match with a DNA cluster linked to the Hale family in Maine. Charts showed distant relations, possibly third or fourth cousins, but strong enough to confirm the DNA came from that lineage. Instantly, investigators recalled the name that never left the file: Richard Hale. He was the prime suspect in 2010, with a contradictory timeline, and among the last to see Anna alive. Though evidence then wasn't enough to charge him, technology now placed him back at the center, undeniably. But the investigation required absolute caution. First, genealogists mapped a broad Hale family tree, tracing branches in Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. They narrowed it down by eliminating those too old, too young, or absent in 2010. After weeks, the list shrank to a few age and location-appropriate individuals, with Richard standing out. At the time of Anna's disappearance, he was 28, living and working less than 10 miles from where the Civic was found. A detailed report was sent to the state prosecutor. Richard Hale is highly likely the source of the foreign DNA. Genetic genealogy rules out most other Hale family members. The lead investigator stressed in a meeting, "We're back at the start, but now with scientific evidence. He's no longer a random name, he's the center." By 2022, the Anna Whitaker case was fully handed to the Special Investigations Unit with one goal: securing direct evidence to convict Richard Hale. 12 years after that fateful snowy night, Richard, now 41, no longer lived in Bangor, but had moved to Augusta, Maine's capital. He rented a small second-floor apartment in an old building near an industrial area, working days at an independent garage and nights frequenting a dive bar a few blocks away. On the surface, his life was unremarkable: a middle-aged mechanic, few friends, no wife or kids, unnoticed by most. But to police, he was the final link in a case that had haunted them for over a decade. A covert team was sent to Augusta to monitor Richard for months. They worked in shifts, logging his departures from the garage, his stops, even minor habits, like when he bought cigarettes, drank beer, or took out the trash. They avoided rushing, knowing a single legal misstep could render the DNA evidence inadmissible in court. Investigators watched patiently, like hunters stalking prey, waiting for the right moment. The opportunity came one May evening. Richard left his usual bar on Water Street, lit a cigarette, and smoked hastily while chatting outside. Halfway through, he tossed the butt onto the sidewalk, lightly stomping it with his shoe before walking away. A plainclothes agent, posing as a passerby, swiftly picked up the butt with gloved hands, sealing it in an evidence bag. Soon after, they retrieved an empty plastic water bottle he discarded in a public trash can near the garage. These small, seemingly worthless items were gold to investigators. In Augusta's lab, technicians analyzed the DNA from the cigarette butt and bottle. When results appeared, they were chillingly clear. The DNA matched the foreign profile found in the Civic's back seat and on Anna's wrist bones. The match wasn't just partial, but across the entire sequence profile, ruling out random coincidence. The report stated, the likelihood of these DNA profiles belonging to different individuals is near zero. The scientific evidence closed the circle. After 12 years, Richard Hale was no longer just a prominent suspect, but officially tied to the crime scene. The blood traces, fabric, and marks on Anna's remains all bore his genetic signature. From that moment, the case left no room for vague theories. Reading the results, the special unit's lead investigator sighed. "We've got him," but he reminded the team that this was just the beginning. They needed to strengthen the case, gather more witness statements, and prepare meticulously for the next step, securing an arrest warrant. Defense attorneys would surely attack every detail of the collection process, so every step had to be flawless. Throughout summer 2022, police continued monitoring Richard, not just for DNA but to map his life, his friends, his movements, whether he ever left the state. They wanted a complete history of his actions over the past 12 years when the arrest warrant was issued. In reports to the state prosecutor, Richard Hale's name was bolded, noted, "Direct DNA linked to victim, dangerous individual, prepare thoroughly for arrest." When the Whitaker family heard the DNA results, they broke down in tears. The father said, in a private meeting with police, "We've waited 12 years for this day. Please bring him to justice." The mother, silent, clutched Anna's photo, her eyes red. Knowing Richard was the one who interacted with their daughter, that fateful night didn't ease the pain, but it offered a glimmer of light at the tunnel's end. In Bangor's community, rumors spread fast despite police secrecy. People whispered that police had new evidence, that Richard Hale, the quiet mechanic, was Anna's killer. Unaware, he continued fixing cars, drinking at his usual bar, driving his old green pickup through streets where every glance held suspicion. By fall, the investigative team was ready. They had direct DNA matching the crime scene, genetic genealogy, a verified timeline, and witnesses. It all formed a coherent ironclad chain. In the final report to the state prosecutor, the lead investigator wrote, "DNA evidence confirms Richard Hale's direct contact with the victim before and after her murder. Request immediate arrest warrant." In winter 2022, in his small Augusta apartment, Richard remained oblivious. But for Maine police, the 12-year hunt was nearing its end. From a vague timeline discrepancy in 2010 to a cold genetic match in 2022, the final picture was clear. Richard Hale was no longer a shadowy suspect. He was the killer in a murder that shook Bangor for over a decade. With the DNA fully matching the foreign profile in Anna's case, investigators knew the next step wasn't just securing an arrest warrant for Richard Hale, but reconstructing the timeline of December 14, 2010, to prove he lied from the start. In complex criminal cases, scientific evidence is the backbone, but a consistent timeline and statements make the true story clear to a jury. They began by spreading out old documents, 2010 interrogation records, witness reports, grainy traffic camera data, and the Civic's discovery location. Next to it, they placed a Bangor, Orono map, marking key points with red pins. The grocery store where Anna worked, the parking lot, the gas station where a witness saw Anna and Richard, the Route 15 stretch where the Civic was found, and the Orono forest where her remains were discovered. Connecting the dots revealed a trail riddled with contradictions. Richard claimed in his initial interrogation that he left the garage before 9 p.m. that night, staying alone in his apartment until morning. No one could verify this, but back then, police had no way to refute it beyond a witness claiming to see him at the gas station around 9:30. Now, with new data, investigators could prove his statement was false. First, Richard's DNA appeared in Anna's car and on her wrist bones, meaning he had direct contact with her at least around the time of her disappearance. Second, multiple 2010 witnesses reported seeing an old green pickup, Richard's vehicle, near Route 15 between 10 and 11 p.m. Back then, investigators noted this but couldn't connect it, as the Civic was found without concrete incriminating evidence. Now, the pieces aligned. Anna left the store at 9:30, spoke with Richard at the gas station, and his green pickup was seen near where the Civic was later found, hours later. Investigators also revisited gas station data, where a receipt was printed at exactly 9:34 p.m. The buyer paid cash, and the blurry camera didn't capture a clear face, but the figure appeared male, wearing a dark coat. In 2010, the image quality was too poor to confirm. Now, cross-referenced with Richard's height and build, the blurry image bolstered the theory he was at the gas station when he claimed to be home. Additionally, the jogger who passed the parking lot recalled seeing Anna's car lights flash on, then the Civic leaving around 9:40. He noted a green pickup trailing slowly behind minutes later. At the time, his statement was deemed too vague, but combined with DNA and new evidence, it became a critical piece. When all data was threaded together, the team built a detailed timeline. 9:30 p.m. Anna leaves the grocery store in her red coat, heading to the parking lot. 9:34 p.m. Gas station camera captures a man resembling Richard, matching the witness who saw him greet Anna. 9:40 p.m. Jogger sees Anna's Civic leave the lot, a green pickup following. 10 o'clock, 11 p.m. Multiple witnesses report a green pickup near Route 15, where the Civic was later found. Morning, December 15th, Civic found abandoned, keys in ignition, purse intact. This timeline directly contradicted Richard's claim of being home before 9. If he was home, how was his DNA in the car and on the remains? How did witnesses see his pickup at the scene? The logical evidence tightened. Investigators noted the drive from Richard's garage to the gas station took under 5 minutes, and from the gas station to the Route 15 spot where the Civic was found was just over 10 minutes. All were within a feasible range, undeniable. In the report to the state prosecutor, the team wrote, Richard Hale's statement conflicts with available data. Foreign DNA confirms direct contact. Witnesses and timeline confirm his presence at the crime scene during the victim's disappearance. His home alone claim is a lie. At the 2022 year-end meeting, the room fell silent. 12 years earlier, they had to release Richard for lack of evidence. Now, technology and patience had brought him back to the suspect's chair with undeniable weight. A veteran investigator whispered, "We let him walk too long." Everyone knew the time to act was near. In early 2023, after months of cross-referencing the timeline with DNA evidence, witness statements, and forensic conclusions, the Maine prosecutor's office formally submitted a request for Richard Hale's arrest warrant. A federal judge in Portland reviewed the reports and took less than 2 hours to sign the order. The warrant was issued in late January, including permission to search his residence and workplace. From that moment, Maine police and the FBI mobilized at full capacity. This was no longer a cold case. It was time to close 12 years of waiting. The arrest plan was executed silently. A joint team of 12 FBI agents and Maine police officers was dispatched to Augusta, where Richard lived. They studied the apartment complex's layout, escape routes, and his daily schedule. The goal was a safe arrest, minimizing risk to nearby residents. On February 3, 2023, at 5 a.m. in pitch darkness, the task force surrounded the apartment complex. Richard was jolted awake by pounding on his door and a booming loudspeaker. "Richard Hale, this is the FBI and Maine State Police. You are under arrest by court order. Come out immediately." Hands raised, stunned and hesitant, he paused for minutes before the door swung open. Richard, in a crumpled t-shirt, froze as flashlights and gun barrels faced him. He didn't resist. Cold handcuffs snapped onto his wrists, ending the freedom he should never have had. Immediately after the arrest, investigators searched the apartment under a court warrant. They turned over every drawer, every box, every closet. In the bedroom, under the bed, they found an old wooden box loosely locked. When opened, its contents cast a heavy silence over the room. An old Bangor, Orono map with red marks circling Route 15 and the forest where Anna's remains were found. Assorted personal items, including a worn women's knitted scarf that didn't match Richard's belongings. And most notably, a small leather-bound notebook with scribbled handwriting. The notebook contained no explicit confession, but it held vague entries about a snowy December night, a small car left behind, and the empty Route 15. These chillingly matched the 2010 scene. Another page mentioned crying in the car and silence after the blow. Though not enough for a confession, these were critical circumstantial evidence showing his preoccupation with the case. Additionally, in a metal box in a corner, police found old fabric scraps, including a faded dark red piece. The lab was immediately ordered to test it, and preliminary results suggested the fibers could match the material of Anna's coat from that night. Combined with archived data on color and fabric, it was likely a remnant of the fateful red coat. At Richard's workplace garage, the search continued. In a toolbox drawer, they found a long iron bar with an unusual dent at the end. The item was sealed and sent for analysis, and within weeks, results showed the dent's shape could have caused the skull fracture noted in Anna's forensic report. Though not definitive, this match further supported the theory that Richard was the killer. As the evidence was laid out on the Maine Police Department's meeting table, the picture was chillingly clear. A map marking the exact crime scene, a notebook with cryptic references, fabric possibly from the victim's coat, and a potential murder weapon. These, combined with the perfect DNA match, the reconstructed timeline, and Richard's contradictory statements, turned a once cold case into one of the strongest files the state prosecutor had ever held. While detained, Richard remained silent. His assigned lawyer advised him to say nothing beyond "not guilty." But for police and prosecutors, that didn't matter. They didn't need a confession. Science and evidence spoke for him. The investigation now shifted to a new phase, preparing for trial, where Richard's fate would be decided. Bangor, upon hearing of the arrest, was gripped by a new wave of shock. People talked endlessly in coffee shops and stores. Many still recalled the quiet mechanic occasionally seen at the gas station or bar. Few suspected that the shadowy figure from years ago was truly the perpetrator. The Whitaker family, quietly embraced in their suburban home, tears falling with a sense of relief. The father said through choked sobs, "Finally, justice has entered this house." For Maine police, arresting Richard Hale was not just the end of a cold case, but a testament to technology and persistence. 12 years of waiting, hundreds of hours searching, thousands of report pages, all led to the moment they handcuffed the killer in his rundown apartment. And they knew the battle would continue, now in court, where evidence had to convince not just them but a jury and the community. Richard Hale's preliminary trial opened at Penobscot County Courthouse in spring 2023. The courtroom was packed, with not only the Whitaker family, but local reporters and Bangor residents who'd lived with the case's shadow for 12 years. The defendant sat in an orange jumpsuit, his face expressionless, hands neatly on the table. From the first moment, the state prosecutor stepped to the podium, voice resolute, declaring, "We will prove Richard Hale murdered Anna Whitaker on the night of December 14, 2010. We have DNA, autopsy results, and evidence seized from his home. Every piece points to one direction." The prosecution's presentation began with the critical scientific evidence. DNA. They displayed images on a large screen, comparisons of genetic sequences from the Civic's back seat, Anna's wrist bones, and the cigarette butt Richard discarded in 2022. All matched perfectly. The chance this DNA belongs to different individuals is virtually zero, the prosecutor said. Eyes fixed on the jury. We don't have just one sample but multiple collected at different times, all pointing to Richard Hale. Next, the prosecution presented the autopsy findings. The medical examiner testified, detailing Anna's skull fracture, the cause of death from a severe blow, and wrist marks indicating restraint. There's no doubt, he concluded. Anna Whitaker didn't die by accident. She was murdered, and someone deliberately hid her body in the forest for 10 years. The defense countered, arguing the DNA evidence could have been contaminated during storage from 2010 to 2020, as samples were accessed multiple times. We can't be sure these samples remain pristine. A single lab error could create a false match, the lawyer said, trying to sow doubt. They also argued Richard, a mechanic, interacted with many in the community, so his DNA appearing somewhere wasn't unusual. But the prosecution was prepared. They called the Maine state lab director as a witness, who detailed the evidence preservation process, each bag sealed since 2010, stored in a dedicated freezer in Augusta, opened only under supervision with signed logs. On the screen, the prosecution showed images of intact sealed bags, cross-referenced with signatures from 2010 and 2020. This is a nationally certified process. There's no evidence of tampering or alteration. That careful preservation allowed us to uncover the truth 12 years later, the prosecutor affirmed. They pressed further, if DNA could be contaminated, how do you explain that we collected a brand new sample from Richard's cigarette butt in 2022, and it perfectly matched the foreign DNA in Anna's car from 2010? That's not contamination. That's science. That's truth. The forceful words silenced the courtroom, with the jury's eyes locked on the defendant. The defense clung to the notebook and old map found at Richard's home, claiming they were harmless notes of someone fixated on a famous local disappearance. But the prosecution swiftly countered. Those lines in the notebook aren't fixation, they're the memories of a killer. They mention a snowy December night, a small car left on Route 15. These details weren't widely public in 2010. Only police and the killer knew. Richard Hale isn't police. As the arguments closed, the courtroom air was thick. The Whitaker family sat in the front row clutching hands. The father stared at Richard, eyes full of fury. The mother teared up, feeling justice nearing for the first time in 12 years. Richard sat motionless, his face taut, avoiding the jury's gaze. The judge declared the case would proceed to a full trial, as the prosecution's evidence was strong enough for a jury hearing. There is clear basis, the judge said, that Richard Hale must face charges of first-degree murder. The gavel struck, ending the preliminary hearing. But for the Whitaker family and Bangor, this was just the start of the journey to justice. After 12 years of waiting, the truth was no longer in the shadows. On the third day of the trial, the prosecution called their decisive card, Dr. Elaine Morgan, Maine's forensic genetics expert, who oversaw all DNA analysis in Anna Whitaker's case. In a simple white lab coat, her voice calm, she began detailing to the jury, from initial sample collection to the modern gene sequencing techniques applied in 2020 and 2022. The blood, hair, and fabric samples from the Honda Civic in 2010, she said, were sealed that night, stored in a dedicated freezer at stable temperatures. Over 10 years, every access was logged, recorded on camera, and signed by at least 2 people. There's no evidence of tampering. On the screen, the prosecution displayed images of evidence bags, each seal with dates and signatures, forming an unbroken timeline. Morgan explained how new techniques unlocked traces useless in 2010. We had only a few skin cells from a fabric scrap. In 2010, that wasn't enough. But by 2020, we used next-generation sequencing to build a complete DNA profile. Comparing it to Anna's wrist bones and Richard Hale's 2022 cigarette butt, we found a perfect match, no discrepancies. The defense interjected, "What about the possibility of error, Dr. Morgan? Labs can make mistakes." Morgan nodded calmly. In science, errors are possible. But here, we calculated. The odds of 3 DNA samples from the car in 2010, remains in 2020, and cigarette in 2022, matching perfectly while belonging to different individuals, are about 1 in 10 billion. In other words, virtually zero. And all steps were verified by 2 independent labs. She paused, looking at the jury. This means science confirms Richard Hale left DNA at the crime scene and on the victim's body. The courtroom fell silent. Some jurors took notes. Others stared at Richard. The prosecution asked Morgan to explain genetic genealogy. She detailed how the foreign DNA was compared to open genetic databases, how software identified distant Hale family ties, and how it narrowed to Richard. This isn't random coincidence, she stressed. Genealogy pointed to the Hale family, and Richard's direct DNA confirmed it. All roads lead to the same place. The defense countered. But you admit genealogy didn't name Richard Hale specifically, correct? Morgan replied directly, correct. It initially pointed to the family. But after ruling out others by age, location, and further tests, only Richard fit. His direct DNA sample ended all doubt. Morgan's clear, scientific, and compelling explanation had a strong impact. Jurors listened intently, many nodding. Some eyes showed resolve, as if they'd found a foundation to believe Richard was the killer. As she left the stand, the prosecution closed the witness questioning with a concise statement. Evidence doesn't lie. And the evidence tells us Richard Hale killed Anna Whitaker. The courtroom atmosphere was heavy. The Whitaker family sat up front, the mother wiping tears, the father exhaling as if unburdened. Bangor residents watching the live broadcast began discussing that the case was tilting toward the prosecution. Richard sat motionless, eyes down, no longer showing the confidence of early days. His lawyer, though calm, knew the expert's testimony left a deep mark on the jury. As the judge adjourned the day, many left feeling the scales of justice were tipping heavily toward one side, the side of truth, of justice for Anna Whitaker. As the trial entered its second week, the prosecution introduced a surprise witness they'd kept under wraps, Mark Dempsey, a 42-year-old welder, once a drinking buddy of Richard Hale in Bangor. In simple clothes, stepping to the stand with hesitant but resolute demeanor, Mark testified that one night in 2014, while drinking in a small bar near Brewer's truck stop, Richard let slip words that haunted him for years. Mark recounted, "That night, he was drunk. Way too many beers. We were alone in the bar's corner. Suddenly, he gave a dry laugh and said, 'You know what it's like when one swing makes everything quiet.' I didn't get it, so I asked. He went silent for a long time, then whispered, 'A head softer than you think. One hit, and it's done.' Then he laughed loudly and changed the topic." The testimony stirred the courtroom. The prosecution tied it to the forensic report. Anna died from a traumatic brain injury caused by a strong blow, exactly what Richard alluded to while drunk. This was no coincidence. The prosecutor asked directly, "Are you certain of what he said?" Mark nodded firmly. "I kept it inside for years, scared of him, but when I heard police found the girl's remains, I knew I couldn't stay silent." The defense tried to discredit Mark, asking if he had a criminal record, debts, or conflicts with Richard. Mark admitted a prior arrest for a drunken brawl, but insisted he had no personal issues. "I'm speaking out because what he said matches her death. I don't want my conscience weighing on me anymore," he replied. The prosecution skillfully linked Mark's testimony to the scientific evidence, reiterating that Anna's skull had a large fracture consistent with a direct blow from a hard object. They displayed comparison images, repeating Richard's indirect confession, "A head softer than you think. One hit." The jury sat stunned, many scribbling notes. The alignment of the witness testimony and forensic findings was a powerful blow. Mark also noted Richard's habit of making cryptic remarks when drunk, like "some things you think will never be found." At the time, Mark thought it was nonsense. In hindsight, it aligned with Anna's body hidden in the Orono forest for 10 years. The defense argued that a decade-old memory could be distorted, that Mark might have embellished after hearing case details. But the prosecution was ready. They presented Mark's written statement, submitted to police right after the 2020 remains discovery, before the cause of death was public. In it, Mark mentioned one swing making everything quiet, matching his courtroom testimony word for word. This proved he wasn't fabricating post-autopsy. The jury watched closely, their expressions shifting. If the forensic expert's scientific testimony had swayed them, Mark's vivid account from a former friend made the case visceral. It wasn't just cold DNA but human memory, a chilling voice from the accused himself. The Whitaker family sat in the front row, tears streaming. The mother whispered, "That's exactly what happened to my baby." The father gripped his trembling hands, eyes fixed on Richard. Richard, in the defendant's area, flushed red, his eyes flashing anger as Mark spoke. He whispered to his lawyer, avoiding the jury's gaze. This reaction made many believe he'd been struck at a weak point. As the day's session ended, Maine's public erupted. Headlines blared, "Old friend, Richard Hale, admitted to crime while drunk." TV news replayed testimony clips, highlighting the forensic match. Bangor residents discussed it everywhere, their belief in Richard's guilt growing. For the prosecution, Mark Dempsey's testimony was the final piece strengthening the case. It didn't replace DNA or science, but added emotional weight, helping the jury see the case not just as probability stats, but a real story where the killer let slip the truth, thinking no one noticed. That arrogance came back to haunt him 12 years later. Leaving the stand, Mark told the prosecution, "I just wanted to do the right thing. I hope her family can find peace." The courtroom fell silent, and no one doubted his testimony tipped the scales heavily toward conviction. On the fourth day, the prosecution called the lead investigator, who'd followed Anna Whitaker's case since 2010, to the stand. In crisp uniform, voice steady but deep, he brought dozens of thick files and large crime scene photos. Before the jury, he didn't just present scattered evidence, but wove a cohesive 12-year narrative. He began with December 14, 2010. Anna Whitaker, 25, finished her shift at the grocery store at 9:30 p.m. She wore a red coat, walked to the parking lot, drove her Honda Civic away. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The screen showed the store, the snow-covered lot, and witness accounts of the Civic's lights flashing. Her parents called police at 1 a.m., starting the missing person case. He detailed finding the Civic on Route 15 the next morning. Door unlocked, keys in the ignition, purse and ID intact. We collected samples, tiny blood traces on the back seat, an unknown hair, fabric scraps and snowy footprints. Photos of the car's interior flashed, chilling the jury. But 2010 technology wasn't enough. Results only showed female blood. We couldn't confirm it was Anna's or identify other DNA. The investigator paused, then continued. We questioned Richard Hale, seen at a nearby gas station that night. His statement conflicted with a witness. Without direct evidence, we had to let him go. Months later, the wide-scale search stopped. By late 2011, the case was officially a cold case. The courtroom was silent, many taking notes. He moved to the 2020 turning point. In June, road workers near Orono found remains in the forest. We excavated and tested DNA, matching Anna Whitaker's file. After 10 years, she was confirmed dead. The screen showed the forensic team's white tent, bone fragments, and the tattered red fabric. The autopsy confirmed death by traumatic brain injury, with wrist restraint marks. This was no longer a missing person case, it was murder. He led into the DNA. We compared samples from the remains to the 2010 Civic evidence. Results, the same foreign DNA appeared in both. It wasn't Anna's, it was the killer's. He pointed to the screen's genetic charts, showing matching sequences. Using genetic genealogy, results pointed to the Hale family. Narrowing down by age and location, only Richard fit. In 2022, we collected DNA from his cigarette butt and water bottle. It matched the foreign DNA perfectly. The chance of error is near zero. The jury sat upright, eyes following. He continued, not just DNA, Searching Richard's home, we found an old map circling Route 15 and the Orono Forest, a notebook with cryptic lines, snowy December night, small car left on Route 15, crying in the car. These details weren't public in 2010, only the killer and police knew. He showed the iron bar from Richard's garage, compared to Anna's skull fracture. We're not saying this is definitely the weapon, but its characteristics match. Combined with other evidence, it's a key piece. Finally, he cited Mark Dempsey's testimony, Richard's old friend. In 2014, drunk, he said, a head softer than you think. One hit, and it's done. He paused, emphasizing, Anna died from a traumatic brain injury by a single strong blow. This statement matches exactly. Looking at the jury, his voice lowered. These aren't scattered pieces, this is a complete picture. Anna vanished in 2010. The case went cold. In 2020, her remains were found. Forensics confirmed murder. DNA led to Richard Hale, evidence notebook, witness testimony, all point to him. Each piece alone might not suffice, but together, they form one truth. Richard Hale killed Anna Whitaker. The courtroom was heavy with silence. The Whitaker family bowed their heads, tears falling. Jurors exchanged glances, many nodding. The 12-year puzzle had closed. The prosecution didn't just tell a story, but rebuilt the journey to justice from disappearance, deadlock, to case revival, and now, bringing the killer to light. As the judge called a recess, public reaction exploded. Headlines screamed, "Investigator rebuilds Anna Whitaker, case timeline." All evidence points to Richard Hale. On social media, Bangor residents shared trial images, calling it the day truth was finally seen. In the courtroom, everyone felt it. The scales of justice were nearly fully tipped. On the final day, Penobscot County Courthouse was packed. The air was thick, silence so deep that every cough or rustling paper echoed. The Whitaker family sat in the front row, faces gaunt from weeks of strain, eyes fixed on the jury. In the defendant's area, Richard Hale sat still, hands clasped, his cold demeanor betraying a hint of unease. He knew, after 12 years since that snowy 2010 night, his day of reckoning had come. The judge signaled the clerk to summon the jury back. 12 men and women entered, faces grave, none looking at Richard. After over 8 hours of deliberation, they reached a verdict. The room held its breath as the jury foreperson stood, holding a paper. His voice rang out, slow but firm. We, the jury, after reviewing all evidence and testimony, find the defendant Richard Hale guilty of first-degree kidnapping and guilty of first-degree murder of the victim, Anna Whitaker. A small wave of murmurs rose and quickly subsided in the heavy courtroom. The Whitaker family broke into tears, the father burying his face in his hands, the mother clutching Anna's photo tightly. Richard sat rigid, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. His lawyer bowed his head, knowing all efforts to counter had failed. The judge looked directly at the defendant, voice stern. Richard Hale, you have been proven to have kidnapped and brutally murdered Anna Whitaker, an innocent young woman. You left her family to endure 12 years of suffering and this community to live in fear. With all presented before this court, the only fitting punishment is life imprisonment without parole. The gavel struck 3 times, echoing through the room. In that moment, no one gasped, no one clapped or cheered. All were steeped in tense silence, as if the entire courtroom bore the weight of the verdict together. Richard was escorted to his feet by police. He turned his head, speaking for the first time during the trial, voice hoarse. I didn't do it. You've made this up. But his lone voice carried no weight. Everything the jury had heard over weeks, DNA, notebook, physical evidence, witness testimony, forensic conclusions, had affirmed the truth. The Whitaker family embraced in tears. The father whispered, finally, justice has been served. The mother silently gripped her rosary, lips trembling in prayer. For them, the verdict couldn't bring Anna back, but it closed a painful chapter, offering some solace that the killer was no longer free. Outside the courthouse, dozens of reporters waited. As the verdict was announced, news spread across Maine. Headlines blared, Richard Hale sentenced to life without parole in Anna Whitaker murder. TV stations broadcast live footage of the Whitaker family leaving the court, exhausted, but with a rare glint of peace in their eyes. In Bangor's community, years of whispered conversations came to a close. Residents, who had suspected Richard since 2010, now had a definitive answer. The vague fear turned into bitter truth, but at least justice was served. In coffee shops and stores, people spoke of Anna Whitaker with sympathy, calling the trial the day Bangor reclaimed justice. For the investigative team, the verdict validated 12 years of persistence. Investigators who joined the search, technicians who preserved tiny blood samples in freezers for a decade, forensic experts who spent hours analyzing DNA, all were present in the courtroom. As the verdict rang out, they nodded to each other, feeling relief after a long journey. The judge closed the trial with a final statement: "No ruling can undo the Whitaker family's loss. But today, we've proven that justice, though delayed, can triumph over time's silence." Anna Whitaker will no longer be a nameless cold case. She will be remembered forever. Richard was escorted to the prison van, his face disappearing behind barred glass. The door closed, taking away a man who had inflicted pain on a family and community. But for Bangor, it wasn't just the end of a case, it was liberation from a shadow that had loomed for 12 years. As dusk fell on Bangor that day, snow began to fall lightly, much like the night Anna vanished. But this time, the town wasn't shrouded in doubt and fear. Instead, in the white snow, there was a different stillness, the stillness of justice served. Richard Hale's sentence became a landmark case in Maine's legal community, showing how a seemingly impossible case, no direct witnesses, no clear video, no definitive murder weapon, could be resolved with the highest conviction through modern forensic science. Legal experts analyzing the case emphasized the key lay in DNA and autopsy findings. In the U.S. legal system, direct evidence, an eyewitness to the crime, is often considered strongest, but most murder cases lack witnesses. Anna Whitaker's case was even more unique. She vanished in a snowy night. Her Civic left on the roadside, her body unfound for 10 years. In 2010, the case could barely progress. But when remains were unearthed in 2020, the autopsy opened a new path. The skull fracture confirmed a homicide. Wrist restraint marks showed she was controlled. These turned a missing person case into a criminal murder, reshaping the legal foundation. DNA then acted as the bridge between the scene and the killer. Investigators proved the same foreign DNA appeared in 3 places: the Civic in 2010, the remains in 2020, and Richard's cigarette butt in 2022. 3 separate samples, collected at different times, matched perfectly. In legal terms, this was objective physical evidence, unaffected by human memory or interpretation. When the prosecution presented near-zero error probability, the jury couldn't dismiss it as coincidence. The defense tried to discredit the DNA, claiming possible contamination, but the prosecution proved the 10-year sample preservation met national standards, with logs and surveillance footage. Crucially, if old samples could be contaminated, how could a new 2022 cigarette sample match? This was the nail that collapsed the defense's argument. Beyond DNA, the prosecution relied on circumstantial evidence. Witness reports of a green pickup near Route 15, the old map and notebook from Richard's home, his drunken confession in 2014. In U.S. law, a tight chain of circumstantial evidence can form a web of proof, compelling a jury to conclude no other reasonable explanation exists but the defendant's guilt. This case exemplified that no single circumstantial piece was enough, but paired with DNA, all pointed one way. Legal scholars also highlighted genetic genealogy's role. It was Maine's first cold case, solved by tracing distant relatives in public databases. From foreign DNA, analysts built a family tree, narrowing to Richard Hale as the only viable match. Without this breakthrough, the case might have stalled at no direct suspect. U.S. law recognizes genetic genealogy as valid evidence if procedures meet standards, and here, the prosecution complied. The case's rarity lay in its timeline. 12 years from disappearance to conviction. Most cold cases lack a body, usable DNA, or technology to reanalyze. But for Anna Whitaker, 3 factors aligned: remains found by chance, strict sample preservation, and advanced DNA technology turned impossible into possible. Legally, the life sentence without parole reflected 2 factors. First, the crime's nature: kidnapping, restraining, striking the head causing death, and hiding the body. This was deliberate brutality. Second, the time factor: the killer left the family and community haunted for 12 years. The court deemed this an aggravating factor, denying parole. Post-trial, Maine legal scholars predicted the Whitaker case would become a reference for other cold cases. It proved justice could arrive late, but not vanish, as long as evidence is preserved and technology advances. It sent a message to those thinking time hides crimes: a single hair, blood trace, or DNA sample can bring justice back. For the community, the case underscored investigative patience. If police hadn't sealed and stored every sample in 2011, there'd be nothing to analyze in 2020. This was a vivid testament to forensic protocol, even when it seemed futile. Broadly, the Anna Whitaker case bolstered faith in Maine's legal system. For years, the victim's family only prayed, and Bangor residents whispered suspicions. But when the verdict was delivered, the community saw that justice could be delayed, but not lost. The blend of science, law, and resolve solved one of Maine's rare fully resolved cold cases. In legal terms, the case wasn't just a conviction, but a precedent. In any cold case, no matter how many years pass, a single DNA trace or forensic hope can bring justice back. Winter 2023 in Bangor, Maine, was unlike the winter 13 years prior. Snow still fell heavily on rooftops, blanketing Route 15, but the haunting dread from the night Anna vanished had settled. The case closed, Richard Hale would spend his life behind bars, and the community could breathe, feeling justice served, though late. Looking back on the journey, from December 2010 to the 2023 life sentence without parole, the 13-year ordeal was staggering. From a search in snowy white with faint hope, through years of a case shelved in a cold police freezer, to the pivotal 2020 discovery of remains. To the moment DNA delivered undeniable truth, it was a circle slowly but surely closed. DNA technology was central to every analysis. In 2010, tiny blood traces and a stray hair were nearly useless. But a decade later, next-generation sequencing turned them into a spear piercing the darkness. Genetic genealogy, a tool police couldn't have dreamed of then, brought the case back to light. Dry numbers and genetic codes, aligned together, formed a silent but resolute voice. Richard Hale was Anna's killer. Yet science alone wouldn't have sufficed. The case needed the relentless persistence of police who refused to let it fade. They were investigators who meticulously preserved every sealed bag, signed every log, and reviewed the file yearly to avoid missing a chance. They were technicians who maintained evidence freezers for a decade, ensuring samples stayed pristine. Without that diligence, 2020's DNA technology would have had nothing to analyze. In the courtroom when the jury delivered the guilty verdict, the shockwave rippled across Maine. Media called it one of the rare cold cases fully resolved through modern science and legal tenacity. Families of other missing persons in Maine approached police, hoping technology could do the same for them. The Anna Whitaker case became a symbol proof that justice could be slow but not lost. For the Whitaker family, the verdict couldn't bring Anna back. Her bedroom in the suburban home remained untouched, an open book on her desk, a coat hanging behind the door. The mother said in an interview, "I know my baby won't come home, but I can whisper to her, 'Sweetie, the truth is out. He's not free anymore.'" The pain didn't fade, but there was solace. The father quietly placed white flowers on Anna's grave, whispering he'd kept his promise, never to give up. Bangor's community changed too. For 12 years, residents lived with suspicion, wary glances at the green pickup passing by. Now they could name the killer, knowing he was gone, the shadow no longer lurking among them. They held a memorial at the church, lighting candles for Anna and all victims still awaiting justice. Many said they felt relief but also sorrow, as justice came too late for Anna to see her town stand for her. For legal scholars, the Whitaker case was a vivid lesson. It affirmed that in cold cases, even a blood trace, hair, or fabric scrap must be preserved. It underscored the power of science and law together. One provides objective evidence, the other a framework to turn it into justice. It reminded that truth, buried for a decade, can rise from cold earth. As night fell on Bangor, snow fell like the night Anna vanished, but its meaning had changed. Back then, snow erased all traces, plunging the community into darkness. Now snow blanketed the town, but beneath it was a closed story. Passing wrote, 15, looking at the Orono forest. People no longer felt only silence and fear, but heard a faint echo of justice. The truth has finally prevailed. The case's end wasn't just a life sentence for Richard Hale, but a milestone for Maine. Proof that a small state with limited resources could solve a complex case through persistence and modern technology. It offered hope to other families that they too might hear a gavel strike in court one day, ending years of waiting. 13 years passed. Justice came late, but it came. In Maine's biting cold, Anna Whitaker's story left an unerasable truth. Time may blur tracks in snow, but not crimes. Science, people, and resolve brought truth back, showing a community that no matter how long the night, the dawn of justice would rise. The Anna Whitaker case wasn't just a criminal file closed after 13 years. It reflected many facets of life in the U.S. today. Anna's disappearance on a snowy 2010 night and her Civic left on Route 15 reminded us that personal safety is fragile, especially for young women working late. Bangor lived in fear for a decade, neighbors eyeing each other with suspicion, showing a reality without justice. Society lingers in darkness. But through modern DNA technology, genetic genealogy, and meticulous evidence preservation, the truth was revealed, and the killer, Richard Hale, received life without parole. This teaches that in real life, technology isn't just a daily convenience, but a tool for justice, demanding serious societal investment. The persistence of Maine police, preserving every blood trace and hair for a decade, reminds us that patience and protocol can make a profound difference. For individuals, the story is a warning. Pay attention to personal safety, don't ignore danger signs, and trust that justice, though delayed, can become reality. In a vast country like the U.S., with thousands of unsolved missing person cases, the Anna Whitaker lesson urges support for forensic science and building cohesive communities ready to protect and speak for the vulnerable. Justice isn't a vague promise. It's the result of faith, science, and unrelenting resolve. Thank you for joining us in the journey to find justice for Anna Whitaker. A story showing that truth, no matter how long buried, will be found. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow more cold case stories, where we'll return with you in the next video.